I'm already in hell, why would I stay here? And so I kind of try to plot my way up and out of that. It's kind of, let's give this pain a purpose.
Meet Natasha Lorde, founder of Tax with Tash. A visionary in tax and finance, she's dedicated to simplifying taxes and empowering financial confidence.
What's the most common question you get asked about tax?
How do I not pay tax?
What's your answer?
I'll-
Natasha, do you feel fulfilled with the work that you do?
Actually, yeah, that is a major reason why I do what I do. I think it's also like a sharpening tool, or it kind of keeps the borders of what I do. Whenever I feel like what I'm doing is just to be done and it's not because it feels like it's something part of a bigger purpose, I usually tilt it, kind of brings me back in.
And do you think that you figured out your why at an early age, or did this come with time and experience?
I think part of figuring it out at an early age was because of being in time and experience for so long. So, because I started this business with my dad when I was 18, so I joined him. He had already been in accounting, but because of all of that, you kind of have to learn your leadership qualities. You have to seek certain things out. So, I think because I started young, I figured it out pretty early, and it's just kind of evolved into itself. It evolves more and more, but it is anchored in kind of my basic um, values and principles. Yeah.
And was there any pressure to, work with your dad and essentially learn from him and then, one day take over?
Yeah, there was. There definitely was. I didn't think I would do accounting. I actually thought I would do something in the medical field. Um, and ironically, I did go and kind of learn psychology, and I do love that side of life. And I thought I would do something with the brain. I actually thought I would be a neurosurgeon, because I just love the brain, and I did love surgery and like dissecting things in biology. So I thought that was going to be cool. But there was pressure to do that, and I thought I really hated it. I didn't like that, but that's the beauty of kind of doing something unexpected. You don't know that you can do something and find your purpose in something you absolutely didn't think you would like at all.
How did you deal with that pressure? And what's your advice to others who go through that similar type of pressure, maybe not just from parents, but, external, the external environment?
Um, it's a tough one because I don't know if I so much as dealt with it as I just didn't have any other option. And I think when you're short of options, you just kind of figure your way to get through it. And maybe because fundamentally I'm not a person who likes to say no or hear no, so I kind of just power through it. And I'm like, look, if I'm already in hell, why would I stay here? And so I kind of try to plot my way up and out of that through accepting what I have in front of me. And there's nothing much you can do that but use what you have and kind of just power through that. Obviously with an aim. It's not just to white knuckle, just, okay, I hate this thing, but I'm just going to do it anyway. It's kind of, let's give this pain a purpose and channel it somewhere. And also be open to being wrong, because I was wrong. Like, I actually found a lot of myself in such a short space of time in an environment which actually is pretty privileged, because I didn't have to go to university to learn far past what university students were going to learn. I was training university students after 6 months because I'd learned so much, and I was able to have a space to operate at an executive level because of that. And because I said, let me just be receptive and learn and absorb and see if this is something I like. And I found that fundamentally it's a business. I like business. I like problems. I like solving problems. And this is just a place to solve them. So I wouldn't be too um, hung up on where you're doing something. I think I would focus more on if it's what you would be doing anywhere. And I thought, if I were a neurosurgeon, I'd be solving problems. I'm here, I'm solving problems. I'm pretty happy with it.
Mm. Something that you said also stuck with me, which is you didn't have another option.
Yeah.
What's the benefit of not having another option? Of course, the extreme of that is um, not many people can deal with not having any other option, and it could lead to severe burnout or depression or all these other conditions. But you could use that as fuel, which it seems that
Yeah.
you did.
Yeah, I don't think it ever stops. Um, it's a place where you can evoke your creative power. Because it's not there, it demands to be created. And so I think people either don't create it or they just live with what they have, which I mean, it's fine. It's just that then you can't necessarily complain because you are able to create something. And it's just going to take a little bit of energy that you actually might not have, but that's what happens. It kind of gets created as you go. It doesn't work with you have and then you give. You have to be in motion and then it creates a certain type of energy for you. But you only find that along the way. You only find that if you get from at least 0 to 1. The rest of it is inertia. The rest of it you kind of just keep going. Um, but the 0 to 1 is hard, and I
Mm.
think that's just a deciding factor. That's it. I don't know what to tell people. Honestly, there are certain things I just don't think you can read about. They're just things that in the moment something becomes clear to you, and not blatantly clear. I think just clear enough for you to decide in a split second what you're going to do. And so either you're accepting your fate or you're creating your fate, but somebody's got to do it. It's somebody internal or it's somebody external. And so I think we have to be more, um, we have to focus more on the framework that we live our lives in versus just the situations that we have. So anything can happen, but if you're operating from your created framework, you can always use something. Nothing is useless, nothing is wasted, nothing is wrong. You can actually use everything. And I think a lot of people get too hung up on doing things the right way because they judge the quality of their experience by the outcome rather than judging it by the journey and how you can actually create a journey that you enjoy, regardless of what's going on, a kind of in spite of instead of despite type of way that you look at life. And so that comes back to what we just said. If you don't have an option, in spite of that, what do I do? Not despite it. So I would say create, and it's very powerful to create because that's what we're supposed to do as humans.
Mm. You spoke about a framework there of a framework for living your life. Could you maybe give us an indication of the framework that you've developed for your own life?
That's an interesting one. I think it's the same thing. Kind of prepare to be wrong, be okay with being wrong, um, and just be curious. I think people are very, very afraid, and it just drains the color out of life because you're not supposed to be deterministic. I think it's very cool when you can walk through life and you have it surprise you. And a lot of frameworks shut down the ability for surprises to come and surprise you. And it's funny because I was just watching a movie I've been wanting to watch, which was Monkey Man, and I thought this was so well written and so well directed, and every shot was just like you could feel every movement, and it was very evocative. And then I watched another kind of rom com, and I just looked at it. I was like, I know exactly what's going to happen. And I was kind of scrolling on my phone, and I looked up. I was like, okay, it's that part of the movie when this happens, and then this is that part of the movie where they fight, and then they kind of come back together. And, you can play it out, and you're just like, okay, fine. And it's reflective because that movie where you don't know where anything is happening, it's exciting. It has at least an emotion. It has at least life. And then when you have something predictable, it has no life. It's not actually exciting. I wouldn't really call that a good movie. It's just what we call a comfort movie. And so in life, you choose the movie that you kind of go through. And I'm not necessarily in, I'm not looking for comfort or ease. I'm looking for interesting, and I'm looking for it to be useful. You don't just chase out pain or whatever. But I think when you don't at least allow it to be absorbed into you, it will crush you. And so a lot of people are very scared to experience certain things, but because you become rigid, you can't be flexible, you can't bend around, you will break. And you just get to a certain stress point that it breaks you. And so my framework is always flexibility and adaptability, and that encompasses so many things. And I think a big part of that, the first step of that rather, is acceptance. And if you can accept your reality, there's no cognitive dissonance. There's no divide between what you're wanting and what you're hoping for and what you're experiencing. You can have aspirations, but if you're too hell bent on them, it will cause anxiety because this has to happen, but your reality is not matching up, and so that gap creates. It's not a good gap to have. You can have aspirations, but if you're too hell bent, your brain's going to break. It's going to break because it's just too big of a divide and there's too little flexibility. And so your whole life is kind of wasted because it's like it has to be this type of things and then the rest of it is trimmed out and cut out and you can't use it. And that's just such a waste, I think.
Switching into tax, you know,
Mhm.
in your opinion, why is it necessary for people to pay tax?
I think it's it's kind of just a byproduct of being compliant sometimes. It doesn't always happen, but if you are compliant, sometimes you will have to pay tax. And the importance is the compliance element. If you're not compliant, a lot of things are at risk. You build your life, you do all of these types of things, and part of the cost of living is the tax where you are. Unfortunately, whether we think it's worth it or not, it's legislatively the cost of being a participant in the system. And you wouldn't have that money if not for the system, even if it's not working as well as we might want it to, or it has its issues. But that wouldn't be there if not for the system. And so I think the important thing is just to be compliant, and to understand what it means to the individual business, trust, or person. What does it mean for me to be compliant as I live my life? Which tax events am I creating? And what does that mean? What should I do to stay compliant?
Mm. And looking at South Africa specifically, where the population is, 61 million, and of that 61 million, only just over 7 million people pay tax. And of that
Yeah.
7 million people, only 3 million individuals are responsible for paying more than 90% of the country's tax. Could you briefly explain why this is?
I mean, that's the 80-20 rule. It's the Pareto's principle. We see it's some version of that lying around. But I mean, the economists found that 20% of the population paid for 80% of the population. Um, and there will always be that disparity because we have the highest Gini coefficients, so we're already lacking in equal opportunity, because our gap between the rich and the poor is the highest in the world. But so aside from that, we also, even if we did have equal opportunity, we just wouldn't have equal equity. There are going to be people who work harder or want to or prioritize something different from somebody else. It's not something that I think we should look for as a society to be equally weighted in that sense. I think we should look more towards, is what we're doing allowing for that type of person to exist, and as well as for the other type of person who doesn't want to do that to exist and they can do that comfortably. That's something that we can look at, where people have agency and the opportunity to choose their experience and existence that they want to have, and it's dignified.
Got you. And if I'm understanding you correctly, are you saying that if you want to live a certain type of lifestyle that comes with a cost of, and that cost just happens to be, for example, tax in this situation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if your certain lifestyles, you want to be a big CEO, that's great. If the other person just wants to be a school teacher, that's absolutely fine. I think it's just that, is the system that we're having going to serve that? But what it won't do is give an equal representation in the taxpayer paying the same amount of tax. I think the socialist countries kind of try to try to balance that out in terms of, and we have a progressive tax system as well. So I think it does account for the more you earn, the more you pay, and all of that. But because of that, you're just not going to find that there's going to be a large, 50% of the population is going to contribute to tax. That doesn't exist anywhere really. I don't think we're going to get to that point where it's just an overwhelming amount of people. And within the subset of people contributing to tax, it's also kind of equally weighted. I don't think it's going to get there.
And if it were to get there, what do you think needs to happen to reach that 50% of people paying tax in the country?
That's a good one. I think the Tax Act needs to be contextualized a lot more to the society we're living in. And for 50% of people to pay tax, our economy would be amazing. Like, it would be incredible. But there would have to be more opportunities for people to earn there. I think before we get to the opportunities, people need to be employable. And that's the problem. More than unemployment, people are just not employable. The skills that we have are just, and the practical skills, I would say. I think we're overeducated and we don't have many people who can actually take their practical skills and intersect it. This is a big word that I use a lot. People don't know how to take their life experiences, their goals, their skills, and intersect it and show up in a way that's more valuable than the next person. I'm a tax specialist. I know social media. I know marketing. When I intersect those things, it's more potent than just a tax specialist who has spent 10 years at the best, whatever, whatever, because that, in the context of building a business, that matters more. So when we look at individuals in the job market, there is not much of an intersection that comes into play because, and if we take it back, we have the highest Gini coefficient. So their life experiences are not very colorful. And if you don't have very colorful life experiences, all you do is go to school and that's all you have to offer. And then you get to a space where if you're offering value to a marketplace, you need to have length and breadth. The person who has traveled and who has had conversations, who overhears their parents who are business people or this or that, are going to think in a different way and bring more to the job market than just the ordinary person who hasn't had colorful life experiences. So we have to take it back. And that means that when we're talking about childhood and when we're talking about education for children, it needs to be a lot more than what we're seeing right now. And then we can actually see that extrapolated into the job market.
Do you think that the first step to solve this problem is start at primary school education?
I do. I do. I think we have to rework our education system. I think it also takes too long. It's a lot of time for someone to be educated, and I don't think most of the information there is very necessary. I also think it's devoid of any practical experience. It's very silencing. It's a very, just be in this place and kind of get out of the way versus an enriching and growing experience. So I don't find it to be particularly helpful to the individual when they get out of this long 12 years. Then what? It's funny because they come out clueless in a space that they have been in where they're supposed to be learning. So, how do we get from here and then spend another 4 years and then come out clueless again? There must be something that's missing because I've spoke with many CEOs and a lot of people come from great schools, but I mean, there's just you have to then start teaching them again, which is why we have this now, where companies have taken on another teaching program, which is internship, because you still don't know after 4 years. And why is that? It's kind of strange. And I think we should interrogate, why is it that you spend 16 years doing something and you still come out brand new and you start again and you learn again? Yes, you have a baseline, but could that not have been done earlier? I know because I started at 18 and I knew way more. And I thought to myself, my goodness, it would have been such a waste of my time if I had gone to university for 4 years and then done articles for three. It was just never necessary because by the time I would have come out of that, all this knowledge that I would have learned is outdated practically. I mean, you don't know how to use e-filing. You don't know anything about that. You just know that is 15%. It's very strange. So I think, yeah, it's we need to interrogate that, and then we can look at how we can place people in a marketplace,
Mm.
or how that can actually create people who can create marketplaces. But right now, it's not happening. It's not happening.
And you also spoke about the intersection of skills. You know, you are a tax expert, but you've also upskilled yourself on social media and personal branding. And
Yeah.
a combination of that makes you effective in business. So, how does an individual, who may not have the opportunity to travel or to be exposed to influential individuals in their immediate network, how does that individual, build complementary skills and find that intersection that they can actually specialize in?
Side quests. I think it's very important that it's for you to be a great professional, you have to be a cool person, just literally a cool person. Like, get hobbies and go ice skating, do something new. Like, honestly, just be an interesting human being, because you find something there and it's got nothing to do with accounting, but just go and do something. Take a walk, go somewhere you would normally not go. Um, Read fiction, not nonfiction, like read fiction, just read stories, watch a cartoon, do something completely off track, because that's the length and breadth. It shouldn't make sense. You shouldn't have someone who's an accountant that does social media. You do something that doesn't make sense, but that starts with doing something that doesn't make sense. Um, I mean, I took up water painting recently, and I can't paint. Like, I can't paint. I've been told all my life, like, art is just not your thing. And I was like, let me just do this, or let me start knitting something random, and it does something. But start somewhere, and
Mhm.
usually try to do that. Do something social so that you meet people in those spaces. And if you enjoy it, then those people stick with you. If you like art, go to an art gallery. You might find cool people that you enjoy. So try make it a social thing, and you'll be social. You'll meet people, and you might find something out about yourself, and you might find how you intersect in that space. So, I mean, it can be outrageous. You could be an accountant for strippers. You could do something like you could do something crazy, right? But the options are there. But everybody's competing for like this one determined space. You could be an accountant for astronauts. Like, do something before you can get nuanced. You have to get broad, and I think people over fixate on nuance, and you don't have to. And they over fixate on nuance, in a boutique way. So it's like, oh, we need to have high net worth clients. That's not nuance. That's not nuance. You can say, I'm going to be an accountant mainly for people who cycle. Have they seen the prices of those bikes? They are expensive. So you could really zoom in and go, well, it just so happens high net worth individuals cycle, and you could go cycle if you enjoy it, and mountain bike, and be an accountant for that. So I think that's how you discover intersection.
Yeah, at the base of it, be a cool person. I like that.
Be a good person. Yeah.
So I want to go into individual tax. The first
Mm.
question I think I want to go into and start at the base is who pays tax and who qualifies to not pay tax.
So that's actually a sliding scale of age and earning. They're kind of more concessions the older you get, but for most people who are under 65, if you're earning less than 95,750 per year, you're not going to have to pay tax. It does slightly adjust year in, year out, but that's kind of for the most current year. And then going forward, over and above that, then you start to pay tax again on the sliding scale of 18 to 45%.
Okay, and I just want to speak about repercussions of perhaps not registering for tax, and you may earn an income in various ways. What is the repercussion of not registering?
Look, it's like um, it's like you having a Facebook profile that you haven't logged into. It doesn't mean you don't have it. It doesn't mean just because you can't see it doesn't mean nothing's happening there. And so that is the misnomer when it comes to taxes, that people feel that just because I'm not looking at it, it's not happening. And it is, because SARS can see those things. So it's just that now you are not privy to the information that SARS is saying about your taxes, or the communication they have to give you about your taxes, or the warnings and the demands and the, all of those things. And so, yeah, that's where people get it wrong. It's still happening. Your taxes are still at play, and you should probably look at it, because if you're not, it's just piling up. And SARS has deadlines in terms of how long you can take to respond to things before they up the ante, and how long you can respond to things before they say, well, you can't dispute it anymore. We gave you enough time. You didn't say anything. And so, yeah, it's very important to see it, so that you can see what's going on.
And I guess it also leads into my next question, which is, there's quite a lot of individual tax um, that once more we may not understand holistically. So, what tax could you maybe briefly go through a few specific related to an individual, maybe that's earning an income, as a not a rural vendor, not registered business, but has a bank account and earning an income? What should that individual know about registering tax, and then um, what would you also advise that individual?
Um, right now we have a big gig economy. I think we have a big informal gig economy, and we're developing quite a formal gig economy. With that type of individual, I would always say have a separate bank account. This actually applies to either or. Have a separate bank account where you have your income that comes from this either business activities. We would call it a sole proprietor, freelancing activities in the more colloquial world. And so you'd have that, and you would spend from that typically on your business expenses, or whatever you need to spend on to generate that income. And then kind of have your other account that you transfer into as your little salary. It doesn't have to be set, it can be whatever it is. And you just transfer it out, and then you have your personal expenses on the side. Knowing that when you have that other bank account, number one, you can build a good credit profile because you're treating it like a business. Number two, you're more easily able to be compliant because you have it all in one place. So now we can look at it and go, okay, have you earned over this threshold? Yes. Okay, cool. Then we need to do your financial statements. We need to submit that to SARS, and then you're all good to go. Because we have to justify your deductions as well, where applicable. But when you are kind of in that freelancing sole proprietor position, the benefits are abundant, they're amazing. But the means that the onus is also on the taxpayer, the onus is on you to be able to prove what's going on. And so if you don't have information, if you don't have knowledge on how to adequately do that, then it becomes a problem. So either you know it or you pay someone who does know it, but you have to be able to translate what you're doing into a space where SARS goes, okay, we understand that.
Okay, yeah, that is really helpful. And I firstly want to speak about how to actually track those expenses. What would you advise in terms of a filing system? And then I want to go into returns. So maybe firstly, could you speak about good and healthy practices for keeping track of all
Yeah.
your expenses?
So the systems that we use are semi-automated, which makes life a lot easier. So I would say leverage technology now, because the biggest complaint I get is time, but I don't think it's time. I think it's really just, I hate admin. I hear that all the time. People tell me all the time they hate admin. And I understand it's really not always that fun, but um, it is critical, it is important to be able to keep it all in one place. But leverage cloud systems, leverage technology, leverage AI. And when you bring that all together, you could actually make your life easier. Other than that, there's the traditional Excel or your other unautomated accounting softwares, or whatever you can do if you have to write it down in a book, something like that. Yeah, but I don't think people don't know how to do that. It's not the problem.
Okay, and going into returns, what challenges do you notice when it comes to people um, actually preparing for tax season and submitting their returns?
Mm. It's the first step. It's the setup. Most people don't have their e-filing set up, and also most people don't know that they can prepare their documents far ahead of time because the tax season actually ended. Well, the time frame is actually from 1st of March 2023 till 29 Feb 2024. So all the reporting that you're doing is only for that period. So if you had a side hustle, if you had rental income, if you had travel allowance, all of that is in that period that is like, a few months ago. So in terms of submitting, now should just be the time of just submitting as opposed to now being the time of compiling and then submitting. And so starting early is actually really, really, really important. When we get to tax season, it's just an easy breezy file.
Got you. And you also mentioned that there's advantages of being a sole prop before actually registering a formal business. Could you walk us
Ooh.
through some of those advantages, and also at what point would you advise individuals who are running a sole prop to then go and register for example, a PTY?
Mm. I think it's so much easier to be a sole proprietor because when you're earning under 1 million, chances of you paying a high percentage of tax is very low. You might actually pay less than in a company because a company, yes, we have sliding scales, but it's also a little bit tedious. It's also additional admin costs, so we have to factor that in. Whereas a sole prop, they might still be on a really low end in terms of your tax percentage. And there's also something called turnover tax that can be done in your personal capacity. So anything under 1 million rand and anything that a person is not fully committed to, I would say just kind of when you're throwing spaghetti at the wall, seeing what sticks, then do be a sole proprietor first. And then after that, we can look at, do you have a company structure? What is the structure for? Um, do you have enough clients that SARS wouldn't deem this what we call a personal service provider, which means the company gets taxed at personal tax rates either way? So you have to see what makes sense, and then you do a little tax plan and you do run the numbers and you say, well, okay, at this point, switching over to a business is more tax effective and cost effective than when we are dealing in a sole proprietor capacity.
Okay, and fast forwarding a bit, you've grown your small business now and you're starting to employ individuals. So, what do small business owners need to know about pay as you earn? Um, and maybe could you walk us through some common mistakes when it comes to pay as you earn?
Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest persecuted tax types because most of state incomes. So people get arrested a lot for non-submission of pay as you earn. And so as soon as you have somebody employed, you have to register for a tax type called EMP 201, which is just simply your pay as you earn, your unemployment insurance fund, and something called a skills development levy. So if you are paying if your salary bill is over 500,000 Rand in a year, you have to be paying 1% of that bill every single month, which is a skills development levy. And there's something else that is an initiative. I guess it's going to end in the next 5 years. So it's not a long term thing, but they've extended it until 2029. And that's something called ETI, which is an employment tax incentive that helps the youth. So if you employ individuals between 18 and 35 and they're earning below 6,000 Rand, you can deduct a portion of that from your pay as you earn bill at the end of the month. So that's just an incentive. So yeah, we've got that employment tax incentive, your skills development levy, your pay as you earn, your UIF, and that all gets submitted by the 7th every single month. And then biannually, so every 6 months, you have to do something called an EMP 501. And this is how you actually build your IRP 5s. This is also how you build your IT3s. So IRP5s, all the summary of your earning information as an employee gets populated there and it automatically then appears on that employee's e-filing profile. And then you've got the IT3, which deals with your investment income. So you'll see banks will issue this out, you've got your interest, whatever it is, and it's recorded on that. And that also automatically then appears. But the institutions and the employers themselves have to compile that every 6 months.
Mm. I understand why people get arrested for that.
Yeah, it's quite something. It is quite something. It's a lot of work. I'm not gonna lie to you, but yeah, there are a lot of mistakes that people make, and also if you don't pay over that amount, it's plain fraud. So they go right for you. Yeah.
Got you. Something that I struggle with in my business is registering for VAT, and I'm not sure if this
Yeah.
is a universal problem throughout the country, which is, really, um, is it challenging to register for VAT and to actually get your VAT registration over the line, or was it just in my specific case?
No, that is notoriously tedious. The goalposts are always changing. It's always been hard, actually. I must say, there was some time we had to go to the branch physically. At some point back in the day, to get a tax clearance, you had to go to a SARS branch. You couldn't go on your e-filing and get it and print it out. But it's been notoriously difficult, and it's ramped up now because we found that, I guess, SARS has discovered that people would register for VAT and then just not be compliant. And the reason is they'd register, they'd do a tender, not get the tender, and just kind of forget about it. But so they've put a lot more barriers to entry, but it is very, very annoying, I must say, just trying to get it over the line.
And I'm sure you get a lot of questions around how does a business owner pay less tax? Um,
Yeah.
and what's your? I know there's many things that we could chat about here, but if you could, give us a few ways in which we could reduce what we pay.
Yeah. I think, again, if you're more of a product-based business or a business with that is not a personal service provider, so you wouldn't otherwise be deemed as an employee. So it's very difficult with consulting services because a lot of people usually have like most of their income from one source. So it's not really too diverse. And so if you're not that, and I'd say it's usually mainly towards product-based businesses, register for turnover tax, because if you're earning under R1 million, the most you're going to pay in tax in rand value is 7,500 rand. Other than that, there are already small business tax, so the small business corporation tax rates, the SBC rates, which range from 0 to 27%. So 0, 7, 21, and then 27%. So usually people kind of, there are a lot of concessions within that. And then take advantage of any tax breaks that do come up that are in line with the business itself, because there are quite a few of them. But I think usually just taking advantage of those tax breaks or the tax rates that are favorable do help, because I mean turnover tax is between 1 and 3%, and like I said, the SBC tax rates are from 0 to 27. So usually, and that's based off of profit, not based off of earning. And so you can always kind of move up and down that ladder.